Instructions for accessing subtitles in a language other than English are included on our board meetings webpage as well as in the description below. Instrucciones para acceder a los subtítulos en un idioma que no sea el inglés se incluyen en nuestra página web de reuniones de la Junta, así como en la descripción a continuación.
So good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting. So go ahead and call it to order. And so the second order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd like, please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and time allocations. Do I have a motion to approve? Anybody can motion.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Meredith and seconded by Julia. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, so next we have public comment regarding items on and not on the agenda. Do I have any public comment? No. Seeing only a small number of people not on the committee. Looks like we don't have any comments, so we'll move on to the next item, which is welcome of Budget Advisory Committee members. Review the purpose of the committee and the meeting norms. The purpose and the meeting norms, we'll get to the next item, but if we could just run around the room and introduce ourselves. I know we do this each time, but it's just a friendly reminder to everybody who's in the room. My name is Chris Carson. I'm the Chief Business Official. I have been with the district since 2020, and this is my second CBO position. I have been a CBO now for about 14 years and been in education at a district level administration position for over 20 years.
Hey everybody, Marcy Trahan, Superintendent.
Lindsay Crawford, CSCA President, and I also work in the Business Department.
Pam Cooney, CSCA Treasurer, and I also work in the Business Department.
James McKenna, parent, 2 kids at Wade Thomas.
Anna Marsh, parent, 2 kids at Wade Thomas.
Cindy Frito, TK teacher at Hidden Valley.
Danny Kessenbaum, parent, 2 kids at Hidden Valley. Wait, you know what I meant?
Okay. Amber Johnson, parent at Hidden Valley. Or kid at Hidden Valley, sorry. Just did the same thing. Christy Fish, principal at Hidden Valley. Rachel Fibush, Wade Thomas, parent to 2 kids.
PJ Pfeffer, parent to a kid at Manor.
Melissa Mann, parent, 2 kids at Brookside. Julie Wolcott, Assistant Superintendent.
Pete Santucci, music teacher, and I'm here as the Manor certificated rep.
Daniel Cassidy, I have 2 kids at Brookside, and I'm a trustee of the district.
Amanda Wagner, principal at Brookside.
Janet Mercer, school social worker at Brookside and Manor, and I'm here as the Brookside.
Corbin Howes with a son at White Hill.
Amish Meg, I have 2 kids in Manor.
I'm Rachel Litwack, and I have a daughter at White Hill, and I'm a school board trustee.
Mary Claire Mullen, co-principal at White Hill.
Meredith Whibbard, I'm the Assistant in Student Services.
And Teresa Machado, I'm the Executive Assistant at the District Office.
We did have one person come in just a little late. Sorry to catch you in the middle of a drink.
I'm Jen. I'm a parent at Wade Thomas. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Next before we move on, I do want to say thank you again. This is our 3rd meeting that we've had, and I know that this is an investment in time for you and an investment in time for what you're putting in for the district, and we do very much appreciate everything that you're doing, and we look forward to working with you again this evening. And so with that, move on to the next item, which is the approval of the meeting minutes for May 20th, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? So we have a motion by Christy Fish. Do we have a second? And it's Fibush. And all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. So the meeting minutes are approved. So the next item is actually the meat of the meeting this evening. I'm gonna steal it. So the first two slides are slides that. It works. Okay, that was me changing it. So the first slide is just the purpose of the Budget Advisory Committee. And the purpose of the Budget Advisory Committee, to remind everybody, is to provide a recommendation to the board regarding budget priorities and in alignment with our local control accountability plan and the various district initiatives, and also to provide a recommendation on cost reduction strategies. And so what we will be doing is providing some information back to the governing board as we move forward. At our very first meeting, we went through the meeting norms, and these were the meeting norms that came up from everybody. And so I wanted to remind everybody that as we go through this evening, we want to make sure to listen, to understand and not to respond, to make sure that others have an opportunity to be heard as well. And if we do disagree, that we challenge the ideas and not the people, and maintain awareness of any movement towards the end game. The whole goal is to come up with those strategies to make cuts and reductions within the budget, and to recognize the difference between intent and impact, and also to work as quickly and efficiently as possible because we do have a limited amount of time. The first slide that we have is just the multi-year projections from our preliminary adopted budget, which was provided to the governing board at the last the last board meeting, which was Wednesday evening of last week. And what this does show is it shows our beginning balances, our revenues and expenses, what you would show as a gain or loss within the general fund, and then our ending balances, and what our reserves are. And so when looking at it, what you note is that we have at the end of 23-24, we are anticipating of showing a 19.54% reserve. And our budget shows at the end of next year a 14.31% reserve. In 25-26, it's dropping down to 7.56. And then in 26-27, it's 3.14%. What is important to note is that in 24-25, we are expecting to be community funded. We expect to be state aid funded in 25-26, and then back into community funded in 26-27. And I don't know if anybody had an opportunity if you all have had an opportunity to listen to the presentation. One of the things that I made sure to point out is just the complexity of the budget as a whole. And part of what I was showing informing the governing board is to just in 26-27 to show the complexity of what we're dealing with. My numbers showed that we would be community funded in 26-27. The County Office of Education, their estimates showed that we would be state aid funded, and there was a back and forth between the County Office of Education and I, and they agreed that my numbers were right to their knowledge, and even with that, they weren't going to make changes to show that we were community funded, but they were going to go back to the state and talk to the state and talk to them about the LCFF calculator as a whole. And so that just shows you the complexity when the LCFF calculator might have some inaccuracies in it as well. And so the other thing to point out is that you will notice on here, I do have a assignment for community funding. It's the second one from the bottom. The reason I'm pointing that out is because what the district is doing is we're reserving the difference between community funded and the state aid funded revenue until we know that those dollars are going to come in. And that's really critical because I know of a district in the county this current year that just until recently was thinking they were going to be community funded, and they flipped back out into state aid funding just about maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago. Yes.
Can you remind folks the difference between the two and what it means for us?
So state aid funding means that you're funded solely on your average daily attendance, and you still go through the same calculations on when you're community funded, but you get paid the higher of what your actually property taxes are or the LCFF based upon your attendance. And so if you flip into community aid status, that's because your property taxes exceed what that calculation is, and they go ahead and give that to you. And when you flip back out, the reason we're flipping in and out is because in the second year of becoming community aid status, you must pay for in lieu property taxes to charter schools that are within your boundaries. You also have to remove your supplemental taxes. And so you no longer get that. And the combination of those two, once those are removed from our property taxes, force us back into state aid, which is why you see this mechanism of what they call a teeter-totter, where we are flipping in and out. And the one thing that School Services of California, who's the recognized leader in district funding in finance in the state, they will say that the most difficult position a district can be in is a teetering district where you're going in and out because of this mechanism. So it's just it can be very challenging. Yes.
If the parcel tax, if you go for it and it passes, would that impact the teetering at all, or that's totally separate?
It's a completely separate number.
Okay.
It's not considered property taxes in the sense of your LCFF calculations. And so I just wanted to point that out. And so that when you look at those numbers, the reason we do drop so low is because of those assignments that you see there. As we move forward, I know there's been a lot of questions about what has the district cut in the past, and also what have other districts done. And so that's part of what we're going to get to this evening as we move forward. I do want to point out that in 2020, both of these articles were from 2020, and they were both leading into the COVID shutdown. And the district did do a severe amount of layoffs in primarily the classified rank. They've been entirely the classified rank. And so what you see are these 2 rounds of layoffs. And what you see within our expenses is our classified salaries have actually gone down over that period. And this is the reason. And so we haven't hired back all of those positions. And so when we talk about these types of things in terms of layoffs and potential cuts in the future, I want to point out that the Ross Valley School District has always done these types of things. We've always stayed in front of our issues. And so when we talk about very little room to go and make these types of cuts, this is part of what we're talking about. And so I do want to point that out. So, and everybody has a copy of this. So one of the districts that's out there that has had to make cuts in the past year is Miller Creek School District. And they actually were forced into doing a spending reduction plan as part of their second interim budget. And so this is their spending reduction plan. And so when looking at it, they have made they've done cuts for, you see the first line item, reduce health program staff. That would be the equivalent of like our nurse, the school nurse. and they've reduced 1.5 FTEs. And I want to point out Ross Valley only has 1 FTE. The second item is eliminate, reduce outside contracts and professional agreements. And so you do see that they're making some cuts there. They're reducing maintenance and operations staffing, 1 FTE. And I want to point out that in Ross Valley, we only have 4 FTEs total in our entire M&O staff. They show restructure instructional and intervention staff based upon equity formulas of 300,000. And for next year, we're anticipating only having 1 FTE in that instructional and intervention coaching staff. We do have within this, you also see eliminate current TK through 2 music programs, 1 FTE. So that's something that they have on the table for their cuts. They also have restructured their TK program to a half-day program. And so you see that listed there. And then you also see that they're reducing staff 2.4 for declining enrollment. I also want to point out that Ross Valley also does make those cuts. Anytime we have a position that comes free, we look to see if it must be filled based upon our enrollment. So we're always doing that through attrition as much as possible. And so it's one of those things that just happens naturally. And so that's the Miller Creek plan. Next is San Rafael Elementary School District. Theirs was, keep in mind that they're a much larger district, and there are 2 districts, and they kind of bleed over each other with a lot of the staffing as well, so it can be rather difficult. And so they also do have a lot of funding that Ross Valley does not have. And so with it,
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. This is very hard to read. Is there a way for you to tell me where the file for this is? Because it's so small.
yeah, we can actually.
Like this presentation that you have, is it?
It's on the board. It's on the agenda for today.
Agenda, yeah.
So if you go to board docs under.
Wasn't
Or not
10
yet.
minutes ago was not.
Oh, sorry.
I saw the agenda, but I didn't see the slides.
There's no.
We'll get it up.
Slide deck wasn't put up yet.
Exactly.
We'll get it up right now.
Thank you. Sorry, it's just very hard to read on the paper.
And then maybe, Chris, or can we enlarge it a little bit on the screen?
I'm a little technical.
That's so weird.
Well, I'll just give it to you on my computer. You can do it online.
I'm really sorry, it's just
Sorry for the delay, folks. We'll get this quickly here.
Is your email address? I just found it on their website. No, it's public out, so we just looked it up on the website.
1 second, I think I can.
Yeah. February 26th, 24th. You found it? Yeah, found it. Quick.
Okay, it should actually be up now. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, but it's under administrative. You need to under public.
Give me 1 second. Get too far down.
Do we know how many students the San Rafael Elementary School District serves? Just as we're looking at the dollar amount on some of these cuts.
I was going to ask the same thing, like ballpark, what is our budget for our district compared to San Rafael?
I believe that they're in the right around 3 times our size. I believe they have 4,500 students. Is that correct? Roughly 4,500 students. Okay, it should be public now. So you should be able to open up that slide under our board docs and be able to pull it up and see. And so when looking at it, there are a number of cuts that they have made. And you can see that within this. Again, they do have 2 districts that their district administration is in charge of, so that's part of the complexity of what you're seeing and the reason you see so many different items. For example, you see eliminate mailing home progress reports. You see improved TK student attendance by 1% is on here. You have transfer post-employment expense to other post-employment benefit offset, so that they must have a early retirement program that costs them. They have reduced utility costs. They have eliminated food at sites in district board meetings. They've reduced district office department unrestricted budgets by 10%, eliminate travel and conferences with unrestricted funds, eliminate extra copier charges. They have used district reserves from the county JPA for offsetting insurance premiums for 1 year, which is a one-time savings. They have reduced North Bay Security Group contracts. They have eliminated board certified behavioral analyst contract. And so it continues on and on. And many of these things that they do, for example, they have eliminated Parent Institute for Quality Education, which is PK training. That's the type of thing that is not offered at RVSD. And so it's a lot of these things aren't things that RVSD can cut. And so I know what we did in our last BAC meeting is we went through and we talked about our expenses. But what I'd like for you to do is this evening, what I'd like for you to do is get into a little bit larger group rather than one person. If you could get into groups of 3 or 4, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But I do want you to think about these cuts that they're shown here, what you learned in the last meeting with us, and start thinking about those cuts. I also want you to remember that as we go forward, employee layoff notices, as we're talking about potentially cutting staff, there is a March 15th deadline and then a supplemental date that we have to issue notices, which is May 14th. So again, the reason that we're doing this now is to look at our cuts for the following year, not for the following school year. So it would be the 25-26 year. And then in terms of our next steps, so to get into groups of 3 or 4, look at these cuts that are listed here, and also look at what we have, or think about what we have done in the past 2 meetings. And are there areas that you think that the district can make cuts? And what do those cuts look like? And so without knowing the dollar amounts at this point, come up with ideas. And what we're going to do after meeting for about the next 15 minutes on this is come back out and share those ideas. So if you could pair up into groups of 3 or 4, and I'm going to give you 15 minutes to work on that and to discuss your ideas. Are there any questions?
Group right here?
Yeah, I can get, kids like see what's also good in their districts and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Only inside, I'm absolutely inside, not outside. Not even my baby, that's why I'm not bored about it.
So, based on what you talked about last time, I feel like we could and should be able to cut some of the 1,500 songs are
I know it was
professional and after reading extension where we can also
No, more like consulting services, like there's so it'd be like, yeah, so like we had like the attorney software, like it was things we have. The software that was on but if we start to talk pictures about it, those will be in our budget next year.
well, but I guess what I was going to do is look at that number and make it another 200.
I mean, it does seem like, something we're all like, okay. Because that's
We're saying from studying this question for the last few weeks. I'm still big on improving our computer software.
right. No, so true. Yeah.
So $636,000 that are
Or what they said.
mostly PG&E, but some water and
What does that mean? For that,
Unfortunately, I don't know, but I do know that. I think
I did not have, so, I was curious, between the schools, the campuses.
But that was well, what I was curious because like I looked it up, there's actually a state program that gives funds to doing plumbing and HVAC, et cetera, to be energy efficient.
Right, is that in a long place?
It's for districts that have.
But it's like, it's not.
Well, so for the plumbing particular, I looked it up. The first 2 rounds were just exactly like the difference, but then they opened up 3 more rounds that they required.
But I guess that, like,
I don't know if we considered applying for something like that. So it's not unfortunately.
But for something like that, though, the only facilities really like sales.
Planning where
Yeah, so stuff like that. Oh, right, yeah. I don't know, I think that's a great, absolutely, like, yeah, no, I'm curious if there is a plan, yeah, that's my long term to get those two.
They generally don't take educating students as well, so I know that's $20,000 still.
So we would have to look at
Shouldn't we just get fast?
Still a long second, but you got it.
I'll vote for you. I think that's what's hard to do. A lot of days, I feel like it should be like a change. Like, why do we have to funding? There's so much of that I'm, it's tough.
I don't understand, they tell you get the grant and then you don't
Like that.
So, but I don't know how, yeah, I don't think how this particular one works. Right, and I think that like a campaign, so their goal was to modernize and really which 1% long-term our retiring utility cost. Right, and I think the second if it's 2 more times.
Right, but then it's the registration and the other stuff to the attendant. Oh, for student
I think it's for the
student attendant,
but that's quite a
versus the student registration.
That's the same with water, putting the water.
So the community.
I remember like when I was just to see the pretty expensive.
Which funding formula drives it?
For example, registration.
The one where
how much money is it
Right, but you're not, you have to show up, you're not like, not
I thought, at least for a steep plan, so I think that
yeah, I looked at it. Yeah.
So sorry, it's not sorry, we're on the side.
Property tax, the community tax. But I was saying, but this was a lot about, especially since, anyway, but it's the same, right, but there's just so much my point being is that this is a recurring case, right? It's $600, but I know it's still a year, if we can cut that down, that's 1%
I just don't know what the management said. I don't want to, like, what actually
I don't think we can
but like what's the recommendation?
So they did a 100 here, and at the end it's a 5 done. So I just knew when I started, I didn't know any of this. I took my kids to grandma's and like all my friends were dying. It's just like whatever. But I had no idea. I didn't realize it had I know, but it seems like the other piece that I would is that like my taking it out early because they're still counted as attendance. They show up late. They see about we can't look in the back. They're counted as absent. That money is going out. So that's like a late flip. Yeah. Well, I think it's packaged. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. No, not like an 8, not 5 minutes, but it's like it was
so, right, most doctor's appointments can be for families. At least for me, like, I want to schedule some first thing in the morning, or like the last thing in the afternoon, but those are hard to do, not late enough. But that it's better, like, I don't think most people know that. You should schedule the doctor's appointments in the afternoon, because that's why they always say that. I don't think people know that. Oh yeah, they go first. I don't think so.
I just saw an article today that some random television is like planning to drastically increase their fees over the next 5 years.
They will, or even, I mean, they'll do work, for example.
I did the independent study.
I don't have conversations with them.
Yeah.
But I think that goes on the great.
I think it's exactly what you want. Because I'm certainly doing that in here.
Well, even if let's say we can't get it, state funding, we use some of the funded money. Sorry.
Dr. Bean bring or work school, then my days are
Here's already planned for those.
Yeah, I definitely think sort of like education can repeat this, same information many times because somebody used it. But as far as the campaign spending, I don't think there's any money. I don't think it's a return at all. It's more, it's gotta be just.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I think I would say I wouldn't like go down to the nickel and dime. I'd say this, I would
We're all
I get it
I've never done
I'm at least one person that changes their choices based on what I know. And I know some of the humans that we already I was shocked when the lady told me about this. Having attendance. What? My kids tell me late. Like they just told me about meeting. So anybody can walk.
Yeah, that's her.
Like once they enter, once she gets all the rule sheets and she enters it, she's not going back in.
But you don't have guidance.
Like I don't know exactly what time it is, but it's
anybody has the ability to.
and I've like tried to change them when I dentist appointments. I'm always asked for the afternoon now. Those are always. You gotta like book what you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, what day at 8? If there's anything that came down to 8, which is administrators, board, and it's like,
She's only open like 2 to 7 bedrooms.
Exactly. Always. Except for Saturday.
There, but my
I don't think I would No, that's a much bigger.
We only glance at it. We only glance for a second with the slides. But the teachers and the management.
Yeah, he said he pointed some stuff out.
Dominican, you
And he said,
don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking that for such a small district, this is more than 10%. Just like
I'm very curious.
well, no, I would rather want to give those out for this.
What have you found out from everyone in
A lot of stuff, whatever you want.
I guess I'm just trying to get to frame what stuff is on this one.
I don't know.
We haven't talked about
So I'm hoping to get one could the last place or so. I'm wondering. We just didn't get to discuss this much last time, but it's. But it's
Bring it through, yeah, back together. It's funny you say that, because I'm
How's everybody doing? Do we want to come back together, or do you want a few more minutes?
Let's come back together.
I want to come back together. Good. I'm just Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little bit of popcorning so that we can get those ideas that you guys have out. I am going to show you this next slide only because the first item on here. And so what we're going to be doing is getting these suggestions from you guys. And again, because of the timelines where we've had to complete the budget the way we did, where we've already gone past those timelines in terms of the layoffs for the coming school year, all of these ideas, and this is something that we talked about in that very first meeting, are going to be informing our first interim budget and our budget moving forward into the following fiscal year. And so what we do plan on doing is having at least one meeting in the fall. This would be the last meeting today, but what we want to do is get these ideas from you guys and come back to you in the fall and provide what those cost estimates are based upon your suggestions, because we can cost out each one of those ideas. And so I just wanted to point that out. And so what I am going to do is I'm going to write down the ideas that you guys are coming up with. And what we will end up doing before we leave today is going ahead and doing an exercise right at the end before we leave. So,
Chris, do we also have time, in addition to the reductions, but ways of growing, ways of increasing revenue? So I don't think any districts have ever become great by just cutting copiers from 86,000 to 82,000.
We had the same conversation in our group.
Yeah,
We were brainstorming ways to add.
Yeah, Pete doesn't need to use pink paper anymore, so you can just use white paper, he said. But
how to increase revenues.
Yes, and reduce costs.
So one of the items, and I think it's important to point out, is San Rafael actually had to grow those attendance rates by 1%. That has been something that we have put out there as well to grow our attendance rate. And as you are in state aid funding, keep in mind that even if we go back out of state aid funding and back into community funding as we're teetering in and out, it's still a staircase type of calculation. So as your revenues as your attendance goes up, it does impact you positively for those years that you are in state aid. So it's really critical that we get those attendance rates up, and that's from the financial standpoint, and then from a purely educational standpoint, it's hard to learn if you're not in class. So I think that's an important takeaway as well for for the community.
Yeah, so the efforts that we will be doing through our district's attendance plan that we're finalizing soon, it'll be, of course, fluid, so it's not just a one and done type of a product, but it'll continue to be evergreen as more ideas come to try to increase attendance, because that is absolutely critical, as well as increasing enrollment, because if you can have every kid come 100% of the days, but if we had all of the possible kids who could come to Ross Valley Schools, attend our schools, then that would be another much added increase to our funding. So that's one. And then the next slide, or this last one here that Chris has, is the parcel tax feasibility study is underway, and we do expect to have the response in time for the June 26th board meeting. And so whether it'll be at that night that the board is able to make a determination based on the information, or maybe they'll need more time. So it'll either be at that meeting or a subsequent meeting where they'll be determining whether or not we'll be going out for a supplemental parcel tax at the November 5th election. That deadline to be able to put something on the ballot is August 9th. And so we'll have to be mindful of the timelines there. But in terms of increasing revenues, the ones that are most sustainable are the ones around enrollment attendance and a regular revenue stream, like a parcel tax. To try to go after grants are needed to be considered categorical in nature. They might pull money that you would have to spend otherwise out of the general fund, but they're also time bound. So they're considered kind of one-time money. They're not ongoing. Question?
Is there also partnering with the Yes Foundation? Because it sounds like from the past meetings, we haven't met the goals with donations, and so finding ways to educate families on how important it is that we meet that goal, or?
Yeah, that is an ongoing. They've had conversations at their last board meeting, which was last week, I think it was, is looking at how can they increase their fundraising campaign to at least fully fund everything that they partially fund right now. So all of music, all of art. If they were able to do that, that would bring in another roughly $300,000 if they were to fully fund those. And then if they could continue to increase their fundraising, what other things might they be able to add into the things that they fund? As an example, they used to fund some STEAM, and those are classes that currently right now only, or historically in the district, have occurred at White Hill. And they currently don't fund any of that. They have way deep in the long history ago was physical education. There are some things that are not within their mission to fund, like PE. I think that's probably why it dropped off, because they're together, they're formed for the purposes of arts education. But there are other elements, and the reason that STEAM was funded is because of the arts in STEAM. So that's why they did fund that. But in terms of the district programs, they're funding art, music, and library books currently. Yeah.
Actually, would you remind us, what is our enrollment at? What percentage?
I think we're going to be taking a look at that because we're going to be putting another message out next week.
It just went up a little bit over last year. We're at 94.1%.
That's
great. So we've increased by about a percentage point over last year's.
That's the enrollment.
No,
I'm curious what the enrollment is.
We were at 1730.
Or now we're 34.
34.
Yeah, and so.
And what's the goal?
Well, given that the entire state of California is in declining enrollment, the likelihood that we would see our all-time high of 2,300 roughly back in 1819. We probably won't see that. It seems like the number of families who even have kids eligible to attend schools is declining in the state of California. So one of the things that, that we could do would be to take a look at the study that we had done through a consultant a few years ago to take a look at demographics. And so to be able to contract with them, they will do some one-off types of studies where they won't have to do a big study. But that group that we used, I think it was Schrader.
No, it was
King more recently, and Schrader before that, is when they were able to predict our low enrollment, our mid enrollment, and our high enrollment. And they also are able to give you an idea of what's the likelihood that these low, mids, and highs will come in. And the beautiful part about that, it was spot on. But that was when the state of California was growing and there was some predictability around that. I think the state is still grappling with what is the exact numbers, because one of the recent articles that they came out that I read was around people who are missing from the workforce and from schools that they can't account for. So where are these people? So they're not working, they're working age outside of high school, but they're not in a university program, they're not in the job market. Where are they? And so that's, I think the state is grappling a little bit of trying to understand some things. But to take a look at, we would need a consulting company because we don't have access to the records like birth rates and the real estate rates of what's likely in terms of what they're seeing. But those are what those consulting companies do.
Marcy, on the attendance piece, am I correct in remembering that the pre-pandemic attendance rate was at 96%?
Yes.
So that's part of where we're working to try to get back to with attendance?
For 15 years average, our attendance rate, historic average, was 96%. So we dropped down to the lowest was 93. And then now, at least this year, we're back up by 1 percentage point. So that means the kids who we do have are attending school more regularly. They're missing fewer days. But it would be great to get back up to the 96% because then in a year where we're not community funded and we're in the LCFF funding, that means additional revenue into the district. So each percentage point, I have it here, I can pull it up. Do you remember off the top of your head? Each percentage that we get is another, I want to say, 200,000, yeah, that's my memory, yeah.
So on increasing enrollment, something we talked about in our group, which of course, which I brought this up our last meeting, what is RVSD not offering that for students who are here and could be enrolled in our schools are choosing charter school or private school. So something I have heard from our community and friends of mine who have looked elsewhere is a language program, any kind of immersion program that we do not offer. And yes, at the onset it would cost money, but often to make money with my limited business mind, I know you have to invest to make money. So would that increase enrollment? I don't know if that's something survey that goes out, but that's just one idea. Or what is being offered at the schools that are leading families to choose not to go to our schools, I think is something really important for us to look at, and especially with our new superintendent starting, what is possible to bring in that we don't have.
You know what's interesting is I actually talked to, I have friends of mine who have kids in charter, and one of the things that they mentioned to me was like, I really like the project-based learning. I'm like, we do that in all our schools and all of our classrooms. I'm like, that's not something new. But what they've got over there is they've got really good marketing. And they have a lot of word of mouth, and they're very good at that.
Well, they also have 12K to TK class versus 26 TK mix. A lot of them, you start school at TK, and you think my 4-year-old will do better in a small group. And once you're in the school, you're less likely to get out of it and move somewhere else in the next grade or two. And so I think that how we implement TK properly really helps us. It's just very different. And once they started TK, they're from there.
And I wrote down dual immersion.
Yes.
I think that was kind of where you were.
Yeah.
I do know that there are credentialing issues that come into play with that, but that's something that we can look into.
Are there existing programs that address enrollment and attendance? I mean, aside from the brainstorming here, is there ongoing stuff that either exists or could get fired up?
The district has just started a enrollment, taking a look at the enrollment. We have a consultant, I know that's a bad word, but there's a consultant we've contracted with this year to help with that.
So one of the things I want to add about the charter is that TK class is TKK, so they might only have 12 kids, but they're also in with kindergartners, which gives them a class size max of 24. So they still, and then they're within the legal requirements of having aides, if you will, paraprofessionals who reduce the adult to child ratio. It's the same thing we do. So it doesn't look, I'm looking at their website right now, they don't have a standalone TK class.
They do this year. I don't know if it was, but I know people in it.
At least it's not on their website. Right. They have a TKK, 2K firsts. Another kindergarten first, second, third.
That's another.
And so in terms of the attendance, we are taking a look at that. We're actively updating all of our letters to parents. We also have a program where we're going to be reaching out to the parents more regularly from the site if the children miss a certain number of days. So that hopefully will start to minimize the number of absences. And just getting the word out to parents that, hey, it's really important for your kids to be in school today. And so that's part of what we're working on to get that attendance rate up. And so kind of what I've been hearing, and I'll be right with you in just a moment, is looking at increasing our attendance rate, looking at increasing our enrollment, and these impact our local control funding formula revenues. We are looking at exploring the parcel tax that you see up here as well, and then also looking at ways to see if we can bump up the YES fundraising. And so those are all things, going back to your question, that we're addressing.
Just a quick follow-up on that. The forecast is including attendance and enrollment flat to what it is now?
So one of the things that is part of our criteria and standards is looking at our attendance rate, and what you can't do is go and balloon your attendance rate to a certain percentage. And so it looks at our historical average, and it also looks at prior year. With our current year being 94.1%, I am showing our attendance rate to go up to 94.3% within our multi-year projections, and so leaving it flat. So anything that we get above that would actually increase our revenues according to what I'm showing, as long as with all other things being held equal. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, just one more thing on the revenue side. I'm wondering about the feasibility of leasing the old district office building.
We currently are leasing.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yes, we lease it to Oak Hill School,
okay,
which is part of the campuses back here. And so they're currently leasing it. They started a year ago. Okay.
Last one on enrollment. Forecasting, are we doing it by like grade level by school, or how are we coming up with next year's enrollment target?
We look at it that way, and we look at it across the entire district as well. And so we're looking at cohorts, and so we look at cohort survival method as well. And there's lots of variations within the Ross Valley School District. Mm-hmm. For example, at the 6th grade level, we get additional students that come into the district that were not Ross Valley students prior. And so there's always a slight bump in our 6th grade class. And so those are some of the examples. And we've traditionally seen a drop in our enrollment as well, going from kindergarten into 1st grade. And so there's always those variations that we need to adjust for.
Okay.
And we take a look at new students who are registering, so that goes all into the factoring. So there's 2 departments, HR and business, that look at projections. And the interesting thing about it, Chris has his way of doing it just as basically a mathematical formula, and mine is literally
what Teresa and I do is literally get information from the sites about new students, as well as the students who are indicated when the AAs have reached out to say, are you returning next year? That information. That being said, there are always a couple of families who forget to tell us that they're not returning or that they've moved. And so when you open the doors of the new school year and the student's not present and the AA calls home to say, hey, where's so-and-so? Oh, so sorry, we've moved, or something like that. So there are some surprises, and we do take inter-district transfers, which are students who reside outside of the Ross Valley School District, and we allow any of the students where we have space. We have to have space in the programs that they want. We need a minimum of, I think we're up to 15 students to pay for a new teacher, and 20 in some of our other classes. But at the elementaries where the class sizes are lower, it's a minimum of 15 in order to pay for all the services to provide for a new class. So anything below that, so we constantly monitor enrollment to see where can we add more kids. And then just because we call it kids don't come in nice tidy little packages, we don't always get families enrolling to fill up a class to 24. And so that's where we have some combination classes at some of our schools, or all of them more recently. And where, like next year as an example, because of the way that the kids need to be allocated into classrooms next year at Manor, we don't have new enrollment to pay for a teacher, but we can't staff it with the existing number of teachers. And so we are looking to hire a new teacher at Manor without any new dollars coming in to support that hire. But then we're monitoring another school very closely, because in the event that their numbers drop, families don't come, they might have a combination class. And so a couple of years, this is probably back in 15, 16, I want to say. It was roughly 3 days before school started, and we ended up having to collapse a class at one of our schools and shift staff around. And that was right before the school year starts. So we hope that families let us know what they're doing. We hope that when they register, they mean it when they register and they come, or that they get their registrations in as early as possible so that we can count on those families and plan accordingly, because it's not great for a staff member, as an example, to learn that they have to be shifted around, or the classrooms. So we hope and we try to communicate out as much as we can. The private schools, I would say all of them except one that we send out to, and it's roughly 15 to 17 throughout the county. We ask them to send out information regarding our preview nights and registration, and they don't do it. And part of it is that they don't want to lose their kids who are TK eligible, so they don't want to advertise for the schools. But this year we had a local preschool that did ask us to come and participate in a parent night. But those are some of the challenges we have on getting the word out to new families who are registering. So one of the ideas we have is, let's get our information in the hands of realtors, so when they're doing open houses, then they have, that can be part of the brochures, if they will, keep them in those homes for their open houses. But I saw a hand up. Yeah, PJ.
Yeah, I was wondering if all of the extra work that you're putting in tracking enrollment is reflected in the actual budget projections, or if it's just Chris's formula.
No,
because
we dovetail, so it's based on our two departments working together and looking at that.
Do we know then, because I haven't been able to see why 2 years out we're projecting to have enrollment like 70 fewer students than we have this year?
Yeah, that's based on if we track for one school year, because we don't register more than for the coming year or during the current year. So it's taking the information we have. We can't predict how many, but we take the kids as we move them up into grade levels. It likely is due to the classes having fewer kids or more kids leaving than anticipating the kids coming in, because TK should be maxed out in the 25-26 school year when it's at full implementation of all 4-year-olds. And because what we've seen is a decline in kindergarten, as an example, next year we're going to need 4 TK classes district-wide. They will be full, but we don't need more than 4. And so roughly speaking, as that's just 2 months shy of full implementation for all of the kids who are eligible for TK. And thinking about the way that our kindergarten classes are coming in, we're roughly running 1 to 1.5 at each of our schools, or at some schools, and some have K1 combos. So our numbers are dropping as we go in. So as those higher class sizes matriculate up and out of our district outside of 8th grade, then that's why the look or the projection is fewer students.
And I could be wrong. I read this article several months ago, but I did read that there is a trend nationwide.
Yeah.
That there's a lower enrollment in public schools. More people are homeschooling. More people are doing charter schools or private schools.
They're not seeing the increases in the charters. So that may have been one article, but the information that we have is that they're dropping all around. Is that it's the kids who were in the United States, for whatever reason, folks may be having fewer, not as many kids, whatever's happening, or people are leaving. But the number of school-age kids nationwide is dropping. And they're not seeing in the articles that we've read from put out by like school folks, is that the drops are consistent across all types of schooling. The increase did happen for the homeschooling around COVID, but they're also seeing some drops around the homeschooling now that everything's back fully open. DJ?
Do we know what trends and where we can emphasize our efforts in terms of when we've had enrollment higher than we were expecting? So that for the past 2 years, we've been 15 or 17 or however many students higher ultimately than projected. So do we know where that's coming and see if we can keep that going?
Yeah, we're trying to track that on our new student registration, like how did you hear about us, so that we can take a look at where we get them. But we're not going to take a look at that until school starts, because there are families who register to save their spot and then they don't end up coming. So we want to look at the actual students who arrive in our schools and see where are we getting them from. Are they newly moving in, or what is going on with them?
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I know we want to get to cuts eventually, but I did want to say, kind of in response to what Rachel was saying about project-based learning and marketing, my first job that I taught years ago was in Long Beach Unified, which is a giant district. But one of the things that they did at one point, kind of when the charter school movement was just getting started, was they said, of course they had tons of schools in Long Beach Unified, the second biggest school district in the state. They said, let's make every single one of our schools into a magnet school, because there are some people that just want to feel like their kid is going through a special program and they get to choose that special program. We'll say you can go to any of our schools that you want, and each school's going to have a focus. And like the school that I was teaching at was an environmental science focus. And so that was integrated in everything. And another school was like arts and engineering focus. And another school was, right? But the schools didn't change that much. But it was mostly a marketing campaign, and there was a little bit, there were more activities around that or whatever. And I don't know, in this small of a district, I don't know if that kind of thing could make a difference for us, but it is true that my perception of a lot of people is that they feel like anything that is just traditional and normal is not going to work for them, because they're not traditional and they're not normal. And they want their kid to go to a school that's not traditional and not normal.
Good point. We did, so back a few years ago, Manor School, we did contract with Expeditionary Learning, the EL program for Manor, and it was intended, the design of the reason that the district spent the money to do that, and I think Parent Club contributed to a little bit to that, was thinking that we would have families that would be a draw, since it is based on learnings that are expeditions, more definitely intentional project-based types of things. And we did not see 1 ounce of requests for intra-district transfers that made a difference at all. Now, one of the things that I look at is the location of our schools, where you have, for most parents who are working, they're not working in Fairfax. They have to travel outside of Fairfax. And so where's the draw to have folks travel when you know our surface streets to get into Fairfax and then back out again to try to get to work? And so there's some constraints, but I think the marketing thing that you're talking about, Pete, is likely something where you just flip a little bit of the wording and then people all of a sudden, it feels like, oh my gosh, this is a special thing that I want to be a part of, which may very well work in our community.
Did that, at Manor, did that close shortly before the charter school started? Was that timing? Am I mistaken? Or was that
No. So
That's the map.
that was the multi-age program that turned into a charter. So they didn't close. They decided they were going charter before the district decided to close the multi-age program. So once they petitioned for their charter, the district said, "Why do we don't need the program anymore." So that's when it closed. Expeditionary learning came into play once the multi-age program left the campus, or the charter started. It started that next year. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this is just anecdotal, but it goes back to marketing. When my kids were younger and we were at the playground, I want to say my youngest was before preschool. We were really little, so we were there in the daytime, early morning, and there was someone out there with a clipboard recruiting people manually. So yeah, like you said, to your point, getting kids in early and getting them, with their core group of friends and peers and their parent group is so important, and it makes such an impact. And I remember being like, oh, does every school do this? Like, I had no clue. I was a new parent, I had no idea. But I could see people signing up right then and there, going to the new charter.
I see like 400 people outside the library in strollers on some day doing some activity together, like with their toddlers. And it does seem like a really cool opportunity to plug in to those parents.
Who wants to do that though?
What?
I'm not signing up to do that.
If someone takes my job for like a week, I'll do it.
Like, all these great ideas, but who's going to implement them? So,
I'll do it.
Who's the salesman? Yeah, great.
I'll go.
I know.
All right, sign me up.
I'll go. Yeah, somehow partner with that. I guess the other thing is to think about the charter or like hardware. What do they do differently that there is a lottery to get in a hardware? And what could we learn from that? There is literally a lottery to get in a hardware. There's got to be something that we can learn from that, right?
Well, Harvard offers a totally different model of education, right? I mean, I feel like it's so different that it's really, but the charter is not that different. And I feel like that is I feel like what everyone's been saying about, I mean, our family went to the co-op, and that is a direct feed into both of those schools. And I think what Pete said was right on target, is that they're like, we're not traditional normal people, so we're not gonna go to the traditional normal public school. So I feel like that is really, I feel like what everyone's been saying was really right on, because a lot of folks we're really good friends with go to the schools, and I feel like what Pete said is just really right on. What everyone's been saying is right on.
I mean, being a regular public school district, we can't have lotteries. The law is written specifically that if there's a parent who resides within your school boundaries, the child gets to go.
Yeah, well,
so that
I think she meant it's full. Not the point. The point was, that's why she said it's full. So you
What I'm
literally
saying, it's lottery because it's everyone wants to be
go
there. So what can we learn from that?
How can we take people and make them think that they can't get in here?
What I'm saying is, what can we learn from what they must be doing something right that everyone wants to go there, to the point that they have to have a lottery because more people want to be at Harvard that they could possibly take.
But also, isn't part of it that it is a small school and not everybody who wants to go there can get in because it's such a small school? And part of the draw of the school is that it's small?
And then
Am I wrong?
think of too, if I said that our numbers are a minimum of 15 to 20 kids to pay for a teacher, they're under the same things. Because being a charter school, they get funded, they still have an LCFF calculated base. So they are like us where we can't say no to a resident. If they move in, we must have their child, allow their child to attend here. But the charters, they can say, we're only gonna have, and we can afford 2 teachers per grade level, whatever their situation is. And then if there are 3 more kids who wanna come, they can't go because that doesn't pay for another teacher. So that's might be somewhat of the reason for their lottery.
If I could add one other thing, there is a major difference between Ross Valley School District, Hartwood, and even Ross Valley Charter, in that Hartwood is considered a non-classroom based charter, which means that they cannot offer the same number of instructional minutes to their children every day or every week, so they're offering a reduced amount of time. And so they also get paid less for it, but that's part of the draw, I think, is that component of it, that they're not having to go to school the entire time.
And just from a student services perspective, we have an awful lot of kids who have had attendance problems here in our district, and that's where they're going.
I think you might have answered this sort of, maybe not. What's our retention from elementary school to White Hill?
It's been higher in the past few years than it used to be. We would lose roughly 45 kids between 5th grade going to White Hill, and now we're not losing, it might be like 15 total. And
so it's pretty.
Yeah, it's likely the families who would like their kids in private high schools. And the private schools are getting really good at the marketing to the families. They're saying if you want to be properly situated, I'm kind of paraphrasing, for high school, you probably better come in middle school. But we're kind of full in middle school. So if you really want to be properly situated for high school, you better get here no later than 4th grade. Yeah, and so we are seeing some families who do put in or let us know that they're not returning in the upper elementary grades too.
So that's the draw.
Yeah, I think it's spread out a little bit more than it used to be just from the 5th to 6th.
Okay, as a trustee, I really want to hear people's ideas on cuts. So
Yes.
I need help with this, please.
So thank you. I tried to capture everything that we were talking about in terms of increasing revenue. So in terms of making some cuts, what are some of the ideas?
So I met with our district's CBO a few weeks ago, so I have a huge list from him, but one thing he said to find out if we have done before, and that's had a huge impact on TUHSD, is the early retirement offering. So and they partner with an organization called PARS. I have the link in the document for you. And he said, not only has that financially been a big success, but then it's not cut in the traditional sense of a cut. You're offering an incentive, an incentive to retire maybe a few years early, one lump sum. And then essentially you have teachers at the highest point of the pay scale retiring, and then you're hiring at the lower end of the pay scale. Anyway, our CBO said it was huge for our district. And they've done it twice. And he said year 1, people were really skeptical. And year 2, they had a wait list. And again, I know our district's a lot bigger, but.
That's something I'm in the process of working on.
Okay.
Use her.
Any others? Come on.
So what we talked about in our group is that the 5,800, that was about $980,000 line in the budget that has lots of consulting and professional service stuff. If that could go down to by like 30%, that would be helpful. And I think there's like we talked last meeting, there were quite a few things, each of them will be small. This one is 50,000, this one is 80,000, but quite a few of those combined together would actually provide at least 1% raise to the teachers together if you combine it. The other major thing that we've talked about is our utility costs. I think it was 5,500 line item. I'm a big proponent of upgrading our utilities. Whether we use the Deer Park funds for there or apply for state funds called SHAPE program. Long term, that's a recurring save on utility costs, and that's not a one-time thing. It's going to be every year saving. Not to say you're also going to make good for the planet. Those were the two major things, right? For non-resolution. So between those, it's easily $500,000 saving per year.
So I wrote down upgrade facilities, kind of in that vein, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Chris, I think you said that, so there were 2 schools that don't have the solar. Are plans already in place for that upgrade?
In order to do that, we would have to have facility dollars available. And so I think that was part of what has been talked about at the previous meeting is, can we look at the Deer Park dollars? Since those have to be utilized for facilities, can you use those towards that end? And so the answer, in short, would be yes. I mean, it's at the direction of the governing board, but yes.
But there's not already a plan that's what I was curious about.
And the 2 sites that do not have it are Wade Thomas and Brookside.
Chris, what percentage of the 5,800s is special ed?
There was nothing there.
It wasn't, okay.
No, I was only showing the unrestricted.
Okay.
So did everybody get that question? Yeah. What percentage of the 5,800s that was talked about here was the special ed program? And it was 0 because I didn't include that.
But does it not include legal fees related to ultimately special ed related costs?
It could. Some of it could, yes.
Okay.
Just that portion of it.
And settlement agreements in some of the NPS and NPA contracts?
Which we don't have the ability to control necessarily, but yes. But I think the question was geared more towards like the services that we're providing, the non-public agency and the non-public school, those types of things. Because there's some big expenses in there, and those sit on the restricted side of our budget.
Our group was kind of talking about a little bit of what we talked about at our last meeting, and saying that really it seems like you have the expertise and the knowledge of the items on the budget that are really critical and where there can be some percentage cuts made, and maybe it's small percentages, but maybe those small percentage cuts can add up to a lot in the long run. And we're talking about things like, again, travel and conferences, copiers, contracts. I remember Susan Artigo in one of the meetings saying, do we need this brain pop program that we're paying for? How much do teachers really miss that? Things like that. And even as far as copiers, maybe it's just nickel and diming, and maybe it wouldn't help. I feel like in the past, and Marcy, maybe you know this, a long time ago, I feel like maybe we had a personal code that we had to put in when we used the copier, just to kind of track how much paper we were using and how much we were using the copiers and stuff. And we haven't had that for a long time. And maybe it doesn't make a difference. Maybe it's more trouble than it's worth. But I just wonder if kind of that mindfulness around the district, that all the employees kind of going, this stuff is not free, this costs the district money, and we should try to limit the use of the copy machines if we can. And even the iReady program, I think that's happening next year with the younger grades doing more work on iPads, maybe. I don't know. Look, I don't like that either. Believe me, I don't. My son's in 8th grade. He doesn't have a phone. Okay, but I'm just saying, Like, the copy machines are expensive, right? The copy machines are expensive, and is there a way we can cut down on the use of the copy machine?
It's not iPads, there are already iPads in the first grade, and it's just sickening.
I know, it's horrible, but is there a way that we can be more mindful of our use of the copy machines and the copiers? And again, like, it seems ridiculous to even say that, like that, how much money is that really gonna save us? I don't know. But I feel like we need to be in a money-saving mindset across the district.
Okay. Again, this is just so we can start to think about areas that we can cut, and I can come back and bring some cost estimates in some of these. And it might be something that we can even implement between now and early fall as well, when we would potentially be coming back. Are there any other ideas?
Working at a law firm, I know they're not gonna offer you a discount ahead of time, but if they're doing 3, 4, 8 of the same special ed related settlements every year, asking them what parts of that process can they streamline, why are they doing potentially the same research over and over again for each issue that comes up. It seems like those should be decreasing steadily unless new issues are coming up.
So legal discounts and streamlining potentially, looking for ways to cut those costs.
I have one more that I wanted to propose. It's obviously not going to happen for this year, and we only spent about half a second on the salary slide last time. But I wonder if there is a possibility of decreasing the 1,300 and 2,300 number that was totaling at 2.235 million for this year, which is significant. It's a management, and it's significant. It's more than 10% of the total. That's a lot of money, and I was wondering if there is a way we could put that number down as another avenue.
Okay.
That's a huge number, given how small our district is.
Any other ideas? Yes.
This goes back to the revenues. Is it an option to bring after-school care back as like an in-house revenue item?
Like, instead of paying a fortune to the Y every month, could we just
bring it in-house to
the district every month? And I imagine you guys could hire 20-year-olds at minimum wage also. I don't know. It seems like that's a wasted opportunity. We pay so much money for aftercare in the district. Yeah. You guys should make the money.
I wonder if that really makes money. Yeah. Does the Y make that much money?
The liability costs.
I don't know.
I don't think they do. I mean, I contribute to the Y for like scholarships and stuff, like they're a nonprofit, I think.
I had that type of a program in my previous district, and we ran the program through a federal CDC grant. We had Head Start program and others, and it was one of those programs that the costs outpaced the revenues and did not pay for itself. But it's certainly something we can look at.
I just wonder, and maybe we just don't know. It doesn't seem like there's that much overhead.
That's certainly something we can look at.
One thing we've discussed in past years, and I'm not sure about the cost effectiveness, though I believe it could be revenue generating, is MCOE classes on our campuses so that students aren't going to NPSs, and we have a special program on our campuses to support them. And some of that I believe is already happening.
I can answer it very quickly because I know we have limited time. We have a requirement to offer for our district a certain number of classes through the Marin County Office of Education, Special Education.
Local Plan Area, SELPA.
SELPA. And so we do offer more classes that are through MCOE than our district is required. And so it does help offset our special ed costs a portion. It's not a tremendous amount of dollars, but it does help. And provides the ability, if we have, not all of the kids are ours, but some of them are, and it makes it easier and is better for the students that are ours because they're at their local school.
Do they determine where those classes are placed based on the majority of kids that, like, we recently had the early intervention program on our campuses because there were so many kids with need?
It's mostly about which schools, districts have space available. So like as an example, this year we have a MCOE class at White Hill. There's not the need next year for that class to operate, so it will not be at White Hill next year. They're not having it because the numbers are so low. So it will be going away. But we did add the early childhood and early intervention, and it was housed at Manor, but we moved it to Hidden Valley this year, beginning this year. And one of the elements we need to look at whenever we have one of those classes is the ability for the kids to be mainstreamed, because that's one of the important parts, is for the kids to be with their peers in the classes and in subject areas.
Do we have anybody else who wants to suggest anything? Yes.
Well, last time Susan brought up like looking at the tech options that students have and kind of putting a survey out, and I am definitely here to support the teachers. So, but just maybe putting a survey out for like tech, professional development, supplies, like what they really need, and just kind of maximize their needs, make sure and if there's anything that's not being used or that they just don't need anymore.
Okay.
Might be nice to incorporate what they don't want and then they're not using in there.
Yeah, well, and I think that's really where that's going.
Yeah.
And we do have a mechanism to do that, where we're surveying the staff that are the staff leaders. And so that would be one way, or we could look at other methods as well, but that's certainly something we can look at.
Can you make it a required survey? Mandatory?
We have a teacher leadership group that meets monthly that represents all of the sites, and so that typically is the group that they would collect data from their colleagues and come together to talk about. And actually Susan is a part of that group. That would make sense. Also though, just to add that a lot of those things that you're naming, although I do think we need to streamline, are all being paid for from one-time dollars that are restricted.
Do we have anything else? So although this is the list that we have, we'll be looking at other potential cuts, and I know that we did make some cuts within our preliminary adopted budget, and so we will be bringing those back as well. And so in the interest of time, I do want to say thank you very much. This has been something that's very helpful to the district, and this gives us a starting point in terms of what the community is thinking as well. And again, this was a very valuable experience for us.
And we hope it was for you too, to be able to dig in and take a look at the budget and how revenues work in the state of California and how that Lost Valley is impacted by all that. So can't thank you enough, especially for all of you who've been able to be here for all 3 meetings. I know there were conflicts and things like that for some of you, where you didn't get into your volunteer position right away, but thank you. So hope this will continue on into next year and future years.
And I know we already talked about it, but I just want to point out the very last item that's on this particular slide. We are moving forward with doing a parcel tax survey of the community. And so you may be getting a text on that, which we would then be able to click on and see the survey and do that. I don't know who is receiving them. It is a random sampling. That's the whole purpose. So if you do get this survey, at least you understand that it's coming from the district. And so we want to say thank you to the community that does do this. And with that, I wanted to move on to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. say thank you very much for your time this evening, everybody. And we will be contacting everybody in the early fall. We'll be scheduling a meeting again. I'll be working with our new superintendent and with the board of trustees on setting up that time. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.